is a special report from 7 News.
Thank you for joining us for this special report. I'm Ana Cabrera, live at the High Park Fire Media Command Center. We are awaiting a 9:30 press briefing from the officials on the very latest information on the High Park Fire. Right now, we are awaiting Larimer County Sheriff's spokesperson, Nick Christensen, as well as Bill Honenberg, the incident commander. As soon as they arrive here, we will, of course, be taking that presser live. Let me give you the latest numbers, what we know so far this morning. This fire did grow since last night, since we last talked to you even just this morning. The latest number is 46,600 acres that are currently burning. The good news is they do have some containment this morning. We're told it's at least 10% contained. Again, we hope to have more information on the containment numbers, those figures here in just moments, soon as those officials arrive on scene. The plan of attack today is they've brought in a ton more personnel. We're talking 1,000 fire personnel that will be on the ground working to continue to build that fire line. We also know they have nearly 30 aircraft. Now that's a combination of heavy air tankers, single engine air tankers, the big Black Hawk helicopters, as well as some of the smaller helicopters. We also know the National Guard troops were brought in to help man some of the roadways in this area and monitor the access. Of course, homeowners really anxious to learn about the status of their homes, which ones are still standing and which ones are destroyed. And we're told we might find out that information later today. The Larimer County Sheriff's Office is planning to go in to the fire zone and get some real good property assessment of all the damage later today, and then report that back to the citizens who are evacuated. Now there is a citizens briefing, only one today. That will be at 3 p.m. at the ranch in Loveland. That's where they have set up a temporary shelter for those residents who are evacuated. Let's talk a little bit about the conditions out here this morning. You can see it is still very smoky. I want you to take a look behind me, and you can see barely a silhouette outline of one of the hillsides back there. Now, unfortunately, that hillside is not the one with the greatest fire damage right now, or the hottest embers. That's actually to the right, where we can't even make it out because the smoke is just so thick. We are seeing the fire personnel arriving. As soon as they step up to the microphone, we will again take that here in just any moment now. This is Bill Honenberg with the incident commander, and he's starting. Let's listen in.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you for coming out. We're encouraged to be able to get our story out. Thank you for your assistance with that. Lots going on in this fire, obviously, of significant effects to this community. So we have some things we'd like to share with you. My name's Bill Honenberg. I'm the incident commander for the Rocky Mountain Area Incident Management Team. We assumed command of this fire on Monday morning and probably will be here for several days. So good to get to know you folks. Let me just give you a quick update, and I'm going to focus first on some successes. And most of those successes I will attribute to two fire departments, the Risk Canyon Fire Department and that Fire Chief Bob Gann. Residents need to thank them. They've been working very hard. Those are volunteers, and they've done a great job protecting structures and residences. Similar with the Poudre Fire Authority, Chief Tom DeMint, he and his folks are doing the same kind of work, working long hours, working hard, saving structures and protecting your community. So we've been working really well with them, along with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, and that's how we're structured. My direction comes from the Larimer County Sheriff as well as from the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest. So let me give you a picture of the fire conditions currently. We're at 46,600 acres. That's an increase of about 3,300 acres from yesterday. And even though that's a significant number of acres, that's fewer acres than what were burned the previous 2 days. So in some ways, that's progress. An additional progress to success. Our current containment reported yesterday evening was 10%, and I'll give you some more specifics on that. I'm optimistic we're going to be able to increase that significantly after today's operational period, although I will tell you the humidity is low and the winds are high today, so optimistic, but it's certainly not a guarantee. So we're at 10% containment, and those containment lines can be described as starting on the northeast corner of the fire. Let's see, we've got a map. So the northeast corner I'll characterize as being at the mouth of at the mouth of Poudre Canyon along Highway 14. From here down to almost to Lowry State Park, we have pretty good line. It's a containment line. That doesn't mean it's a controlled line, but we're fairly optimistic we'll be fine along this portion of the fire down to here where you see that red line, and that's what we call open fire perimeter. We currently have crews and engines working there, and they are making progress. Working west to the Roan Mountain Road, you can see a black line there. That's a containment line. Again, fairly confident in that containment. From there west, however, into Lawrence Creek, and then on west to the Buckhorn Road area, to the Stove Prairie Road that comes down from the north. We've got a lot of work to do in that Lawrence Creek. Fire movement yesterday, gained some line, lost some line, but folks are working really hard in there, both with engines and crews. Coming west from the Buckhorn or the Stove Prairie Road on west along the Buckhorn Road, we've had some success yesterday, but some failure where we lost some line, where this corner of the fire actually burned and then came back towards firefighters, and they had to back off. And that some of those lines they thought they had containment on, they lost. So some success, some failure. So let me go back up to the Poudre Canyon and Highway 14. We had a couple of spot fires across there. One spot fire yesterday, about 25 acres. That was our first priority. We don't want the fire established over here in Hewlett Gulch. And we had success in stopping that fire from advancing, and we will continue to be really aggressive with any spot fires across Poudre Canyon, across Highway 14. That brings me over to this corner of the fire, which is along Highway 14 and east of Stove Prairie. You can see open fire perimeter. And if you're familiar with Poudre Canyon, that's extremely steep, heavy fuels, and a very difficult place for firefighters to work. We'll be trying to address this portion, and we may be doing some burnout in here as we have the right conditions. Coming south along this entire west flank, we've got really difficult conditions to the point where we're assessing the safety of putting firefighters in there, and it doesn't look very good. We're looking at some what we call indirect strategies, where we may use roads, ridges, and other places further from the fire where we may be able to establish some control line or use the roads, natural barriers, and put some fire in there to do a backfire over the next several days. And that's a strategy we're currently looking at. This area of the west side of the fire is on the National Forest. Not many structures at risk. Some of it's wilderness. Of course, resource effects are always a concern, but fewer values at risk, where we have some opportunity to not put firefighters at risk in this difficult terrain with those red-needled dead pine trees, that conifer fuel that's very, very dangerous, and to back off and try and take that more safely over the next several days. With the goal of, as this fire comes to the highway, we'll meet it there and be aggressive in keeping it south of the highway. So that's the current picture. We are currently staffed at just over 1,000 people on this fire. After today, when we get all our resources in and online, we'll have around 100 fire engines, 34 crews. Our aviation fleet consists of 5 heavy air tankers, 5 smaller air tankers, what we call single engine air tankers or seats, 14 helicopters, and some fixed wing aircraft that provide supervision for aviators and supervision for firefighters on the ground. That's our staffing in aviation. And I will tell you, yesterday we talked about the inversion lifting. When the inversion lifted, we flew those heavy air tankers and those heavy helicopters nearly completely throughout the day, as much as we could, and it did have a positive effect on our efforts to contain the fire and protect structures. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Nick from the County Sheriff's Office, and then we'll take questions.
Nick Christensen, Executive Officer, Larimer County Sheriff's Office. Nick is N-I-C-K, Christensen, Christensen. And due to the progress that our combined firefighters have made, we do have some good news with respect to evacuations. We're still working out the details, but our team is looking at lifting evacuations in a couple of areas to get residents back into their homes where it's safe to do so. Realize it's very inconvenient to be out of your home, and we did that for good reason, for life safety issues, etc. But we're going to see if we can pull back a little bit and fine-tune that. So a couple of those areas. One is Shoreline Drive area. We are planning to remove those restrictions by the end of the day. I don't have a specific time at this point. We'll be meeting with the citizens at the 3 p.m. citizen briefing and going over the details of that. But that is one that we should be able to open up later today. Also, the Bellevue area just to our west here, 27E, County Road 27E to the east, we plan to open up later today as well. Again, time and details to be determined. We'll share that information through our Joint Information Center with the citizens and then provide more detail at the citizen meeting today at 3. Anybody who goes into that area will need to check in at the EVAC Center, at the ranch, at the First National Bank building where we have the Red Cross and others staffing that. They'll get credentials. Initially, some of these areas will only be open to residents only while they get relocated and settle in. We don't want looky-loos or the media for that matter going out there at this point where they're trying to get horse trailers and lots of vehicles and stuff back in. We want to keep that open for them and them only. So it'll be credentialed access only initially until they've had some opportunity to settle in. There are a couple of other areas where we're looking ahead to tomorrow, and based on the progress today, and we'll see how things go and reevaluate tomorrow morning. We hope to be able to at least consider removing the evacuation orders for Bonner Peaks Ranch, which is to the north here, and then 29C, also known as the Missile Silo Road, which is just outside the entrance to Risk Canyon. A couple other areas that we're looking at are Mill Canyon and Soldier Canyon, and again, these 3 areas, or 4 areas really, we hope to be able to have some good news on those tomorrow, but we're not able to make that decision at this time. The other big thing we know that our residents are concerned about and thinking about is the status of their homes within the fire perimeter. And so there has been a joint team assembled that is evaluating those locations, determining ownership, determining the status of each property, and compiling that information for citizens. Unfortunately, I don't have an exact time on when that will be done. We're working through that. We should have more information today at the 3 p.m. citizens meeting. We'll also share that with the media and the general community at our 3 p.m. media briefing as just where we're at with that. But that's a major focus. We know people have been displaced. They want to know the status of their home and next steps. So that's all I have on that. Again, we'll take questions. I see we have Patricia Billinger here with the Red Cross. I'll put you on the spot, but if you want to say a few words, they're an important partner of ours. They're taking care of the evacuees, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to say a few words if you'd like.
Thanks. It's Patricia Billinger, B as in boy, I-L-L-I-N-G-E-R. Today, as we're getting some good news, some people will also be getting bad news. Our focus is going to be moving towards providing that emotional support for the evacuees, health and mental health, and also making our own plans to help them with long-term recovery. So some people today will be hearing some good news. A lot of people, regardless, have been working on adrenaline, and when you're working on that adrenaline and that hope, that keeps you going. And so we're really going to ramp up our availability of mental health counselors to meet one-on-one with people today, so that as that adrenaline ebbs and reality sinks in, whether it's good or bad, they've got someone to talk to in private, one-on-one. And we're also working to provide that for the firefighters who've been working so hard. They're exhausted. Some of them have lost homes, and so we're going to be there with mental health counselors for them just to provide that emotional support. And as I mentioned, we'll be looking at long-term recovery next, working with partners so that we can connect people with resources in the community to help them recovery. And part of that is just walking them through the planning of what are you going to do next. Some facts and figures for you. Through 3 p.m. yesterday, we run our numbers ending at 3 p.m., so I don't have any newer numbers than that. We've served 541 meals through the Salvation Army, one of our wonderful partners, about 1,500 snacks, and there are 61 Red Cross workers and more coming in to help with the recovery. We've had a total of 48 overnight stays from 25 unique visitors. So most people, they've stayed with friends and family, but as we've seen, hundreds of people have been coming every day for really to feed their need for information at the shelter.
Thank you. We'll take questions at this point for a few minutes.
Could you talk to the, it seems 4 days in now, a little bit longer, but we still don't know the number of, the definitive number of burned homes so far. Do you think that's unusual, or, I mean, could you talk to that? It seems like covering other fires, we've had more definitive knowledge by this point. Is it because of the unusualness of the fire, or?
Well, the primary reason I will tell you is because it's pretty dangerous for firefighters and county personnel who can help determine the specific addresses and structures to go into those areas. That's the primary reason. Is fire behavior is starting to diminish, where we think, at least in some places, where we can start to pick those areas where we can safely have county personnel with our folks with the wildland fire trained individuals go in and determine the which structures were lost. And I'm certainly certain the sheriff wants to get that accurate, as soon as possible, and we're working with them pretty hard.
We understand it's going to be
Go ahead.
We understand the heat's going up this afternoon, but tomorrow there's a potential for higher winds. Does that change? Either those change how you're going to attack this fire?
We will essentially use the same tactics, but be more vigilant to employ firefighters egress as needed, possibly sooner rather than later. We're not going to put firefighters at risk. We're just not. And so we have a whole system in place associated with escape routes and communications to make sure we can egress people as needed as quickly as we need to. And we have a concept of escape routes and safety zones, and we will be really vigilant as those winds increase tomorrow in that respect.
How are the firefighters doing physically and emotionally?
I will tell you that those local fire department personnel, particularly the Risk Canyon volunteers, are tired. And we're doing our best, and I think now we've got enough resources on board that we can rotate in and relieve them. So those folks are tired. They've worked really hard. The incoming wildland firefighters, I think for the most part, are doing really good. Our safety record's been great. That's one goal of my team, is to ensure we're giving them good support. And support for firefighters is good food and good places to sleep, as well as good assignments. And I think we're doing pretty well with that. A lot of these young men and women that come in, this is what they do. It's what they train for. They work hard at it. They're physically fit, and they can work hard all day, but they need good support. And I think for the most part, that's going pretty well.
No injuries then?
Just one minor that we know of at this time.
Bill, would you talk a little bit about structure protection? We've heard some pretty amazing stories about helicopters with intricate maneuvers around houses. Can you talk about what, from the air and on the ground, how these houses are being protected?
From the air, we have an aircraft with an individual that's called an air attack supervisor during the day. And his primary role is to get a fix on priority missions. In other words, fires moving towards a residence or a set of residences. So he has two things he can do at that point. He can deploy aircraft, heavy air tankers, or heavy helicopters. And those helicopters, those snorkel ships you see flying around with those long snorkels, those aircraft are really effective, as well as the retardant aircraft. So that's an option if we can't get firefighters there. If we can work through the contacts on the ground, those individuals are division supervisors, and deploy engines to protect those structures as fire moves towards them. That's even a better choice. And sometimes it's a combination of aircraft and firefighters. So one of the difficulties of this fire is we've got many miles of fire line, as well as interior fire line with unburned areas where sometimes fire becomes reestablished and may move towards structures. So we're trying to do two things: set priorities to protect structures, and at the same time construct fire lines so this thing does not continue to grow. So it's a combination of aviation, engines, firefighters digging lines to check the fire spread towards structures.
It's been reported that some firefighters, I think you just mentioned it, some of the firefighters have watched their own homes burn. Obviously it's something against human nature. They'll want to run over there. That's what they have to do. Can you expand upon that?
You know, he was here during more of that period of time.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of specifics on that. I can tell you that certainly some of our personnel have homes in areas that may have been destroyed. I think they're waiting for that information as well and concerned about that, but still out doing their job. So it is a tough situation, and I won't share any specific stories without talking to them, because that can be pretty heartbreaking, whether you're a responder or a citizen out there waiting for more information, and they're all kind of in the same situation at this point.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
We have to register. I live a mile and a half up 25E.
Yeah.
A mile up and a mile north. Do we have to register before we go in?
Yes, you need to. Citizens should check in at the evac center at the Larimer County Ranch, the First National Bank building there, to get credentials to go into areas that will be that the evacuations will be lifted. That plan should be in place by 3 p.m. this afternoon. You can check in there at that citizen meeting or after that time. There should be that capability as well if you can't make it at that precise time. So that's the process for that. We'll have more information at that meeting. We're still working on the details of how that will work for the couple of areas that we're removing those restrictions. So good luck to you. I know it's tough to be out of your home.
Do we have any new numbers on structures burned?
Nothing new. The assessment team is working on that, so we don't want to throw out any speculative numbers at this point. We're just waiting to get that information as soon as we possibly can. And more important than the total number is getting the individual information out to each resident who has been impacted so they can start dealing with that process.
Can you talk about the beetle kill trees, how that factors into today's efforts?
Okay, on the west side of the fire, there is a significant acreage of those conifer trees, the lodgepole pines, that have been affected by the mountain pine beetle. Significant amount of mortality in those stands, and you've all seen what we call a red needle pine tree. Those red needle pine trees have essentially almost no moisture in them, both the needles and the stems of those trees, and in some cases they have broken up and fallen on the ground, where we have what we call heavy fuel loadings on the ground of very dry fuel available for ground fire, which then becomes established and will move up in a ladder situation of flame into the crown. So we can easily get running with wind, running crown fire through that very dead and dry fuel. Obviously that's dangerous for firefighters with rapid movement of intense crown fire. It's also dangerous in other ways, such as snags falling down, trees breaking off, and all those kind of things. And that's why we're being so careful in that west side of the fire, to figure out where we can meet the fire on our terms at a location that's best for firefighters.
Could you talk to the scale of this? I know you work locally here on this force when you're not the incident commander, but how big is this, and how big of a concern has this been, maybe historically compared to some of the other fires in the state? How does this stack up? Maybe I'm looking for more of a general.
Well, you know, acreage is a measure of fire, but it's only part of the measure. For incident management teams and firefighters, the measure is really the complexity. For this fire, the complexity is the fact that it's ran into much of the community on the west side of Fort Collins. Obviously, dramatic effects on those individuals and those residents, as well as general effects to the community with tourism, smoke, discomfort, concern. So you got to put this fire at one of the probably more difficult and more complex ones. I mean, you're probably familiar with the 4 Mile fire from a year and a half ago, the Hayman fire from several years ago, actually 2002. It was much larger acreage-wise. You know, it's up there in the top few fires in Colorado over the last several years.
What's the typical firefighter shift?
Well, a normal shift is what we call an operational period. We have a day operational period and a night operational period, and we try to make that 12 hours. Oftentimes it's a little more than that. We have what we call a work-rest ratio, which is 2 to 1, 2 hours work to 1 hour for rest. So we try and do everything we can to limit it at 16 hours so they can rest 8 hours and be available for tomorrow.
With the smoke laying low the way it is right now, will that hinder the aerial attack at all?
This time of day, and we actually had a more substantial inversion yesterday morning than what we have this morning. Yes, it does. And a lot of times those inversions will lift mid-morning like it did yesterday, but oftentimes this smoke that settles back into the lower elevations affects communities and affects our ability to deal with the fire in the morning. One thing it does do, though, is it keeps that solar heating off the fire until later in the morning. That's a little bit of an advantage. Disadvantage in terms of aircraft, however.
Bill, what are your goals for today?
Well, the primary goal is to increase our containment by fire line, and fire line could be established by firefighters building line directly against the uncontrolled fire, or by burning out from a road or possibly a stream or a river. So that's one goal, but a second, and in some ways even more important goal, is to do everything we can, primarily with our what we call a structure protection group and the engines that we have deployed, to make sure we're not losing additional buildings within the fire area. We get a thing called a secondary fire. In other words, the flame has gone past and we're dealing with it maybe somewhere else, but within there's some unburned areas, and now maybe we have just a slow creeping fire that might come in if we're not giving that area attention and burn another structure. So that's how we're doing that.
What parts of the line are you going to concentrate on today? Geographically, what part?
That southeast corner, or Lowry State Park, is important. We want to do whatever we can to get that entire east flank contained. That Lawrence Creek drainage is also very important. And then from there west, along this, what's the river there? The Buckhorn Road. The Buckhorn Road. So that area from Lawrence Creek along the Buckhorn Road is the other area of concentration for us. Well, and I can't ignore the north side of the fire either, where we don't want it across Poudre Canyon. So I guess there's 3 places that we're today focused on.
Just a couple days ago.
All right, you are watching a live media presser on the Hyde Park fire right now. If you're just joining us, a recap quickly here. The fire is now at 46,600 acres, at least 10% containment at this point. Fire officials are optimistic, though, that they could see more containment by the end of today. No guarantee, obviously, but they're hopeful and they're optimistic at this point. What they're saying is really they've seen 3,300 acres increase from overnight, which sounds like a lot, but to put in perspective, is still smaller than the increase they've seen in the past. They've gained some lines, lost some lines yesterday. Red Cross today focused really on emotional support. Some of the firefighters also lost homes in this fire as well. So we'll continue to follow this. 7 News at 11 a.m. Of course, we'll have continued updates there. Also, we will have continued live streaming from the media presser on our website, thedenverchannel.com, so you can go there. But we'll be back here for more news, 7 News at 11.